Welcome. Is everyone ready to get started? All right, just so you can get prepared, we've got a couple of people, Erin and Margaret, so get ready. You're going to be number 1 and number 2. So my name's Elena. Thank you very much for being here today and being members of Women Who Code. We've got a lot of great talks. This evening we're going to kind of start things off, and then we're going to have the talks. You will have a few minutes at the end where a couple of you could come up and give a 1-minute lightning talk. So if you are interested in doing that, start preparing in your mind what you want to talk about and run up here towards the end. And we want to give a big thank you to Yelp for hosting us here tonight. Do you have a few words to say?
Thanks, guys. We're happy to have you here. Women Who Code, we've had you guys over a couple times. It's always been a pleasure. But yes, we're happy to host you guys, but we are also hiring. So Yelp connecting people with great local businesses, great local reviews. So we're growing as a company on our technical side and in our sales positions as well. But for you guys, we're definitely hiring web developers and back-end engineers, and we're particularly looking for Android developers. So come talk to me, Elena, if you have any questions about the opportunities here at Yelp. Thanks.
Okay, so tonight, be social. If you tweet, use the hashtag WWCode. Please tag your photos on our Facebook page. And I am at Elena. I send out a weekly newsletter letting you know about all kinds of awesome events and just general cool news. So if you're interested in being on that list, just shoot me an email and I will add you to that. Women Who Code is expanding. We're going to Austin, and we're also going to a smaller town in Mexico. We are in talks as well about expanding into Berlin. So if you know someone in Austin or a company in Austin who would like to be a Women Who Code host, please let me know, and we'll be sure to connect them with our new organizers there. We do have one scholarship for O'Reilly's Fluent Conference. So if you're interested in getting that, email me. That'll be, I guess, the first person to reach me. And we also have several passes for Alt WWDC. No, we do not have any passes to WWDC, but there is an alternative conference running at the same time, and we do have several passes for that. So if you are interested in going, let me know. That is sold out as well. And we have some people who are interested in being mentors, and some people who are being mentees. So if you are someone who would like to mentor someone in Women Who Code, or if you are interested in finding a mentor, not all mentors are female. And we've had some really, really great successes with, I want to give a shout out to New Relic. We have someone from New Relic who spent 3 months training 2 women who are part of the core Ruby team, and they are ready for their first developer position now, thanks to the time that they spent with their mentor. And since our last lightning talks, we have a Scala group and an algorithms group. So we want to give a big welcome to those groups. And yeah, yay! And if anybody would like to, start another class or host a single event, let us know and we can talk about making that happen. We have a great lineup of speakers tonight, so you'll be seeing them in a few minutes. I just want to give a special shout out to some of the companies that have been great supporters of us over the past couple of months. But the real people who deserve thanks are on this next slide, because they have put the hours and the blood and the sweat and the tears into helping create events for the now 3,000 members of Women Who Code in the Bay Area. So thank you very much to all of the organizers. All right, that ends the introduction. Erin, would you like to come up and begin lightning talks? So Erin is the founder of Spitfire Athletes. She's a Stanford grad and a serial entrepreneur. She's self-taught Ruby and iOS developer, and she's going to speak to us tonight about iOS development.
Is there a way to put the microphone? Yeah, that would be great. So I'm going to use this. Okay, sweet. All right, let's get started. Hey everyone, my name is Erin. So tonight I'm going to talk about how to create a custom API for your Ruby on Rails app and then send its data to an iPhone app. And then from the iPhone app, send data back to the Rails app. So I created a sample Rails app here called the Superheroine blog. It's like a feed. It has superheroines in it. And so let's get started. So here's the Rails app. First, you start by installing the Rabble gem, Rails API custom builder. And this is, as you probably know, an index.html.erb file. So you create a custom index.json.rabble file. And you say, hey, give me a collection of the posts and the attributes title and content, because all we really want is the title of the post and the content. In your controller, make sure you just remove whatever Rails put there so that it'll put your Rabble output. And that's pretty much it. So when you say .json at the end of this URL, you get your JSON output. So you can then take this and put it in your iOS app. So here's our iOS app. It's just one table view, and it has a .h.m. Here we have the URL connection. JSON data basically takes the data that we have and makes it into foundation objects that our iOS app will understand, and then an array of those objects so that we can iterate over them in our table view. And then we have a fetch entries method and a post entries method. So in our init, we create the posts array, which is the array of those posts, and we call the fetch entries method. And then we say, OK, initialize the data with this URL. Notice this URL is exactly the same as the one here. So then we say run the URL request and run this connection with the request and do it immediately. There are a few more connection methods we run. This one says, OK, once the connection receives the data, append it to the JSON data. This one says, once the connection is finished loading, serialize the data so that I know what to do with it. Reload the table view. And then this one is like, oh, what happens if there's an error? Let's just say there's an error. That's pretty much it for the connection part of the app. This is pretty boilerplate table view code. If you've done an iOS app before, you include this in all table views. But the interesting part is here. So we create a basic dictionary that has the key, so like the title or the content, and then the content, which is the object for key, which we pull. So here we say, OK, let's get the entry post. And then post, give me the object for the key title. So that's like, give me the title. And then here we say, make the title the main text label of our table view. Same thing here. We say, post, give me the object for key content. So give me the content of the blog post. And then make it the subtitle. So this is pretty much it to pull the data from the Rails app. So we're going to run it. And here it is. So this is the same as that. Yay. Now, last part, I have about a minute left. I'm going to show you how to post data to the Rails app. So, oh yeah, one thing I forgot to show you, I ran the server. It was running in the background, so don't forget to do that or else it won't work. So this is a little bit more complicated, and I used AF networking, which I won't go into, but if we just look at this code here, it's a post request to this URL, and we're going to give it the parameter. The name of the author is Lois Lane. We're going to say, oh, make an article on the major, and she's an awesome cyborg superheroine. So HTTP connection stuff here. So we're going to just run it. OK, and then when we go to our Rails app and go to posts, we should see it in the bottom. There it is. So we just sent data from our iPhone app to our Rails app. So that's how you do basic APIs, and happy hacking. I'll just grab this. Hopefully this works. Oh.
So this is Margaret. She's going to give a talk on making Firefox OS app, and she's a developer for Mozilla, and she works on Firefox for Android and sometimes for iOS, and she loves the open web.
Sorry, I'm just adjusting this so I can see what I'm doing. I'm a last-minute substitute for Heather Arthur, who I think has given talks here before and stuff. So I'm going to kind of do what she was going to do, except I'm going to do it with actually an app that I made. So how many people here know about Firefox OS? Anything about it? Okay, so a few people. So Mozilla, we love the open web. We're making a new phone, a smartphone that would compete maybe with Android and iOS that is built on the open web. So, okay, that's the lightning version of that. Anyway, you can Google about it if you want to know more. Making apps for that, though, is as simple as making a web app. How many people here have made a website or know any HTML? Okay, awesome. You can make a Firefox OS app. So to test apps, not everyone has one of these devices yet. There's like developer preview phones, but they're in limited supply right now. But luckily, it's all the web, so things should work in Firefox. And there's actually this add-on for Firefox called the Firefox OS Simulator. So you can run a simulator similar to how we saw that iPhone simulator earlier. And so I installed this earlier, and then I go to Tools, Web Developer, added this handy menu, Firefox OS Simulator. Awesome. And it opens this thing in a tab. And so first of all, you can add your own apps to test in here, but you can just run it to see what it will look like. Ooh, it's like a phone. But this is all exactly HTML, and I actually was working on Firefox OS for a period of time. And I was working on this, and it's completely open source. You can see the code on GitHub, and you can contribute to it if you want, which is pretty cool. So I was working on this, and I wanted to actually make an app myself to see what it's like to be a developer. And on Android, I have this app called Pattern, made by one of my colleagues that lets you choose patterns for wallpapers from the Color Lovers website. And there's pretty patterns and stuff. And they have an API, actually, that you can use to get these images, which is pretty cool. And so I made a basic, super dumb version of this that I called Mural. And I used the API to just get images. Ooh, images. And it's on my GitHub if you want to look more closely. And so this is just a website, as you can see. And to make this into a Firefox OS app, all I needed to do was make this app manifest. And this manifest has more stuff than you necessarily need. I implemented this web activity as part of it. But basically a name, description, basic metadata. So I hosted this on my server. And I so now I want to test. You can do this with local apps also in the add-on or in the Firefox OS Simulator. So I add this to test. Oh, it's installed. Whoa, cool. And so, okay, I like this one. I click on it. Let's hope this works. Ooh, okay, so it's kind of hacky right now. For wallpaper, at least, you need special permissions to set the wallpaper yourself because it's like a security threat or something. But so I'm sharing it with the wallpaper app, and I set it as the wallpaper. And then now home, ooh, I set my wallpaper. Super cool. Anyway, I don't know how much time I have left, but there's our Firefox Marketplace is a place where a lot of these apps are hosted. And there's a bunch of developer documentation to help you build these apps and like guidelines for how to make them look good and tools you can use and stuff. And to deploy them, you can submit them to the store through there. So Firefox OS is actually launching later this year in initially targeting Latin American countries. So we're making this phone that's cheaper, and so it's for people who can't have smartphones right now, who can't afford them, to be able to like access the web and like the full smartphone experience. And so that's how we're entering the market. But if you want to make an app, we have so much room for apps here. And they'll also work perfectly in Firefox for Android. Plug for the thing I work on.
Next, we have Zasmin. Zasmin is going to be talking about the tic-tac-toe sprint. She is one of the leaders. Some of you may recognize her because she's one of the leaders of the Ruby Tuesday group, and she's running the tic-tac-toe project right now. She's an intern at Babylist, and she's going to be going to Dev Bootcamp this summer. Welcome.
Hi. Hello. Tic-tac-toe. So apparently it was played in the Roman Empire and during the Egyptian Empire also. The British called it noughts and crosses, and we call it tic-tac-toe. So why did we decide to build tic-tac-toe? For me, it was a project that I wanted to gain a better understanding of Rails. My skill level before tic-tac-toe was being really comfortable with Ruby, building a lot of programs with just Ruby, and building a few projects with Rails, and I had a few gaps in my understanding, especially when it came to routes and controllers and views and that type of interaction. So I wanted to build an app that I can explain clearly and was simple, wouldn't take that much time, and that was test-driven. So that's all tic-tac-toe is about. Kind of the process. So I built it with Chenoa, who's currently out of town, but she's also a Ruby Tuesdays core team member, and we paired up for a few hours each week. We tested first, at least in the models, and went through the models pretty quickly. Then we got to the controllers and the routes and the views, and all these questions came up. Which do we do first? How do we test these? How do we get our game to play in the front end? How do we want the users to interact with the game? We reached out to other people about these different points whenever we would get stuck, and people would usually say, oh, just make AJAX requests in the front end to play with the game, but we didn't want to do that. We wanted to keep the Rails app as simple as possible and just use HTML and ERB. So we used the partial. It was like love at first sight. All we needed to do was make the partial, which was a form, and whenever the user, clicked on a button, it would either give you X or O. So it was exactly what we needed. So those are kind of the things you'll be going through on Tuesdays if you're interested. It was a great process for me. It really closed some of the gaps in Rails in my understanding, and I feel pretty good about it. So hopefully we'll see you on Tuesday.
So next up we have Mercedes, and after that is Eve. Mercedes is going to be talking about monitoring metrics with event-driven data. She's a recent Hackbright graduate and software engineer at Real Gravity, and she's immersed in event systems and data in her spare time. She's a Jill of all trades who likes to fix things and make things out of course, code.
Okay, let's see if I can get my, it's the wrong thing. Oh, thank you. I was like, that is super helpful. Sort of. Let's see. That's because I have, wait a minute, I think I gotta do this slightly differently. Yeah, I used to work in IT, can you tell? Okay, maybe I can find play button. Okay, yeah, so I am going to talk about something which probably sounds really, really boring, but I find really fascinating. So yes, I'm a software engineer at Real Gravity. I started working there about 3 months ago and got the opportunity to come in and help them re-engineer their event system because they did not really have one at all, and or we're just starting to build one. Previously, they had an analytics system. So what's an event? Anyway, an event is pretty much anything that can be written to a log file from your application. So this generally is any type of error messages you might write, any type of interaction with JavaScript. Most of like the stuff that we do, I think, is JavaScript and XML generated. And specifically, what we do is video players and video and advertising. So we need to know when that stuff is working and when that stuff is not working. But basically, we can generate anything we want to with an events system into log files, and reading that can find out really interesting things about our application. So I apologize that these slides are really wordy. There's a lot of information here. But in a nutshell, log files are written, and we feed things into an event router, which then feeds things into we can send them anywhere, actually. We can send them to more log files to parse out later. We can send them to Hadoop. We can send them to, right now we send them to Logstash and Elasticsearch, so we can actually look through those and find out what relevant data is. And the cool thing we're really doing, which is what I'm going to talk about a little bit more, is Redis. So we send what we call data primitives to Redis, which is like we have a player ID and an error message, and we count how many times that happens. So we can find out, like, is this player actually filling ads? Is it not filling ads? Are we not making any money off of it? Which is really important to know. And that ends up looking like this kind of spaghetti code event system here, which is really complicated. But I just show it for example of like, yes, this is kind of an over-engineered, but yeah, this is kind of what we have to do to get this running. And let's see, so monitoring. Most of you probably think of like, this is the sysadmin's job, right? You monitor the systems and you tell when things are up or down. Not exactly. So you can monitor when things are up or down. And I can say my server is running great. You know, the CPU load is totally low and, you know, it's totally good on memory. Disk is not full. But like, what if your application's down and you have no idea because you're only monitoring the system? And this was actually a project that I worked on, and Hackbright was trying to tell, like, based on HTTP requests, like, how do I tell when my website is up or down? It's not monitoring the system with Nagios is not going to tell me that. So I need to specifically find those data primitives and be able to monitor on those things to tell what about my application is working and what's failing. So we have actionable metrics, error messages. We have ad errors, video errors, application errors, login failures. This is another really interesting thing you can monitor because you can find out, like, if your login failures go up, you know, is somebody actually trying to get into customer accounts? Are we, you know, seeing like somebody trying to actually do a dictionary attack on our server? And we can kind of like head that off before it becomes a real problem. And then the other thing, like if you have lots of API calls in your server, in your application, which you probably do if you have a more complicated application, these can be internal API calls. How long do those take? Is that, you know, slowing down the rest of your application performance because it's taking forever? So yeah, these are just kind of like really simple things that you can look at, but you have to go through your application and determine like what is important about the data that I'm storing. A lot of people say like log everything, and yes, you should log everything and you should put everything in your data event system. But you have to figure out after you start logging everything, what about that is important? What about that is really useful information, and don't alert and monitor off of everything because it's not going to tell you useful data, and then you start getting to the point where you are hearing all these alarms go off all the time and you can't figure out what they're there for, so you just ignore them. So figure out what's really important about your application, and most of the time, like in our case, it's going to be basically failures that are costing us money. So, and then some resources for you guys to look at in case you're interested in this stuff. Pingdom is a really simple, like, is it up or down, and does some kind of more complicated stuff if you pay for it, but pretty much just has it, is it up or down as a free service. New Relic does some really complicated stuff and is an awesome application. I'm not super familiar with it, but I hear great things about it. StatsD is another one that was written by Etsy and does like simple aggregate counters that you can actually just write code for and send to Nagios or other types of alerting. Gecko board is another really cool just application that does basically visualizations, graphs, really kind of shiny meters and whatnot. And I found that extremely useful because even though it doesn't do any alerting, I could come in, pull up the graph, and like be like, okay, this is my dashboard. Like, what's going on with my application today? Nagios is the tool that everyone loves to hate, and it totally sucks, but it's really useful. Everyone hates it, seriously. It's really has a big learning curve. PagerDuty, and then what we're doing, which is roll your own, we have like a combination of a little bit of everything. So yeah, I think that's it. Thanks.
Next up is Eve. She's going to be talking about making your views fast. She's a human interface specialist, software engineer, designer focused on interface and interactivity, builder and contributor to open source projects, and I have heard her referred to on multiple occasions as a unicorn. Next up is Alicia.
Okay, so So what I'm going to talk about today is how to make your iOS views fast, because as you know, most iOS applications are seriously I would say, most iOS applications rely on interactivity a lot. And when you interact with the application, it needs to be responsive. And the frame rate needs to be high. It needs to hit 60 frames. Otherwise, you would notice that something's wrong. So I'm going to talk about 4 things that you can do to make your views fast. That's my Twitter account and email. So first is, if you're using a table view, the table view reuses itself for you. If you're creating something that has a lot of sprites, you want to implement your own sprite reusing procedure. The reason is because creating objects is actually very slow, because every time you need to create a new object, the phone needs to find a strip of memory, it needs to fill them in, it needs to process the memory into something that stores information for an object. So if you could, you should always reuse the objects that are created. So save and pull and reuse the objects. The second is to pre-compute everything that is actually slow to make. So one example, so this is like you have less than 17 milliseconds per frame. If you have an image view on the screen which contains an image that's not decoded, then the decoding process is potentially going to take longer than this time. If that happens, your frame would drop. So, like for example, if you have a gallery, the gallery takes all sorts of image formats. So JPEGs, PNGs, and TIFFs. Those things need to be decoded and transformed into an internal format that the GPU actually understands. That takes a lot of time. So what you want to do is you want to decode it in the background, and you want to scale or crop all the images in the background before you even show the views. This will not magically make your application run faster. What it only does is it makes your application do some work before the work is actually needed. So you can hide the lag. The third thing is a little bit flamey. It's about when you're making buttons, you should try to use images instead of having a function or a method that draws an image of a button. So avoid using drawRect. The reason is because images are larger, but they're very fast. Although they're inflexible, if you want to change the shadow, you need to go back to Photoshop or Illustrator and create a new image and go back to your application. So sometimes you'll be tempted to create drawing code that would allow you to not include images. This would sometimes work if your buttons are static. If you're dynamically creating buttons, then this could be a problem. So use images and drawing code judiciously. That's a fling part. It's sometimes faster to do in Photoshop. The first thing is to use transparency carefully and to blend judiciously. So in iOS, there's a lot of blending. So let me give you an example. So go back. So like in this case, the book itself is at least one layer. It could be multiple. And the background is not a layer. The shadow is not a layer. The buttons are blended on. And on the top right, the logo is also blended on. So when you're dealing with interface design, you want to use blending sometimes to reduce the complexity of your code and to save your designer some time. But remember, every time you blend one more pixel onto a pixel on the screen, the GPU needs to touch it. And sometimes it needs to touch this pixel every frame. So if you have a lot of views that are overlaying with each other, your frame rate might suffer. There's one method that is advertised to be used judiciously by Apple engineers. It's called CA layer set should rasterize. What it does is to draw the entire layer into a frame buffer, and whenever the layer needs to be displayed on the screen, the sublayers aren't composed onto the main layer, but there's one image simply composed onto the screen. The problem with that is that images are actually pretty big. So if you think about an iPad 3 or iPad 4 as a Retina display, a full screen image takes a lot of memory. If you turn rasterization on everything on, then performance is probably going to be fine, but you're probably going to be running out of memory. So use this judiciously. And always instrument. The best solution to that, actually, is to reduce the number of subviews. Okay, that's all.
So Alicia is going to talk about overcoming imposter syndrome. Alicia is currently senior software engineer at Lyft, an app that helps people build good habits. Previously, a two-time founder, Alicia has been working in early stage startup since 2007. Welcome.
Hello. Hello? Okay. So I had this awesome subtitle for how I stopped worrying and learned to love the code, and I was going to make all these Stanley Kubrick references. But that was really hard. So instead, you're going to get cats. What is imposter syndrome? Well, imposter syndrome is it's a feeling that you're not really qualified, that you kind of got to where you are through some kind of fluke. And studies have shown that women are particularly susceptible to having imposter syndrome, and I think it's particularly bad in tech because there's so few women programmers. Well, you wouldn't know it by looking at this room, but usually if you're the only person who's a woman in the room, it can feel like you don't belong, and you're like, I probably got here through some kind of fluke. And certainly that's how I felt like for many years. I just didn't feel like I was a real programmer, even though I actually followed a very textbook path to programming. I started programming in high school. I got into a top engineering school, but I thought, I probably got in because of affirmative action. I got a good internship, but I thought maybe, my interview was probably easier than other people. I got good work evaluations, but then I thought maybe I didn't have the super hardcore hard projects. They put me on something that was easy and doable. I graduated with distinction, but I thought, I didn't really take the really hardcore CS fourth year courses, so it was easier. But you can certainly see that there's a pattern here of not saying that my accomplishments were the result of my ability, but actually through some kind of fluke, luck, or chance. And this is how I felt like all the time. It just felt like, I knew this little thing about coding. I could do some stuff, but everyone else knew all this other stuff that I didn't know. And I think when you're just starting out, it's really easy to feel that way because there's so much to learn. But even once you get good at it and you're pretty competent, it can still feel that way because there's always new languages and new frameworks coming down the pipe. And you just feel like everyone else is so on top of it and you're just so behind all the time. But what really turned it around for me was once a coworker who I considered one of the good programmers, unlike me, he said to me that he thought that a piece of code I had written was actually really cool, and he was really impressed with how I did it. And he was one of the best programmers I knew. So I think at that point I was like, maybe this is not the right way to think about things. Maybe it's more like that, You know stuff, other people know stuff, you can learn from each other. This is more the way it is. So finally, after 10 years, I thought, maybe I've been selling myself short a bit all this time. And so, but for many years, I felt like programming was not the thing I was destined to do. I thought after I graduated, I should go do some business stuff. That's what people tell you, right? Go learn some business stuff. So I did that. I actually took the role of marketing at my first startup. I don't know why. I don't know anything about marketing. And after a couple of years, I realized I'm actually way better at coding than marketing. So 2 years ago, I made a big change when I realized that I was doing things that I was doing day to day, I really didn't enjoy. And I just went full time back to 100% coding. And I've learned so much, and that's really helped with getting over the imposter syndrome and getting more confident, and finally not selling myself short anymore. So one of the things with imposter syndrome is that you feel like you don't want to speak up. I certainly felt that way. I didn't want to ask questions because, oh no, they might find out that I don't know anything. Or I didn't want to put out ideas because I thought they weren't good enough. And that certainly hurt a lot. And I think it's especially bad for women because when you're the only woman in the room, you feel like you're representing the whole gender. So if you do something stupid or you say something stupid, you're like, oh no, all women are bad at coding, or all women, don't know something or don't know man pages. That was my first big thing was this fourth year was you don't know what man pages are? And I was like, I haven't used Linux yet, sorry. But over time, I realized that good programmers, they're not magic. There's no secret magical barrier separating me versus them. I can code, I can do stuff, I can do some stuff they can't do, they can do some stuff I can't do. It's not like they have this, they get endowed with this pouch of magic dust they can sprinkle over their code and suddenly make all the bugs go away, right? So the takeaway is you can do stuff too. That's really all it is. Don't underestimate yourself. And one of the things I learned about imposter syndrome was that it can actually be a good thing. It makes you work really hard. And it makes you stay humble. And I think that's better than being a programmer with 2 polo shirts on going, I'm an awesome coder, when they're really not that good. So, thanks.
Okay, Jamie, you're up next. But is Radhika or Anne? Okay, would you mind coming over here? So Jamie's going to talk about recycling e-waste. She's calling for a discussion about how people get to recycle e-waste.
Hello. Hi, my name is Jamie, and I work for an organization called Computer Technologies Program, and we provide vocational computer training to people with disabilities. So that's me, and I'd like to ask you how many people here know about what e-waste is. Could you raise your hand, please? Okay. So it's not really a very new topic, but I thought it still might be a good idea to talk about it because, this is a group of coders and we all have electronic devices and most of us work at a company that has a lot of electronic devices, including computers, mobiles. The thing is that we know about e-waste and we know about recycling and we think about that we should do it, but this is what is happening right now. Long story short, we are not doing the job or you're not recycling. It's like only 1/3 of the computers are recycled and it's 1/5 for the televisions and it's 1/8 for the mobile devices. So it's like 27%, 20%, and 12%. So I just want to make a couple of suggestions on easy ideas for doing recycle the e-waste. First is just pass them on to someone you know. You may not find it useful, but somebody may be usually really appreciate it. And you can bring it to the store where you bought it from. Some companies take them back, like Dell and Apple. All companies have different policies, so you might want to check on that. And lastly, there are a lot of recycling venues. Some of them are for-profit, some of them are non-profits. One of the venues we are working with is called Computer Research Center. What we found them interesting about them is that they also provide vocational training for people with disability when they're repairing their computers. They have people with disability do it, or they teach in the process. So these are my simple ideas, and if you have any ideas about how to increase the percentage of recycling e-waste, or if you have any story about you making effort to do it, or if there is any reason you haven't done it or you tried but didn't work out for you, I'd like to discuss more with you. So please come talk to me later, and thank you very much.
So Radhika is going to speak about the informed woman. She has a PHS and a CS and has been working on a startup building news radio service for mobile devices that converts written text to audio and streaming from cloud-based services. So her initial target is women because she believes they're better listeners.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Radhika Thekath, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Agivox. And I've been doing this startup for about 2 years now, and we've pivoted, a couple of times. What we're doing is we're building a news radio service that is streamed from our server down to your smartphone. And unlike traditional radio or podcasts, our news is based on RSS feeds and blogs that are actually written content. And we convert it to audio. So we synthesize it, and we stream that down to your phone. So we know that you won't listen unless the synthesized audio is of great quality. So we spent a lot of time, figuring out how to make the quality good enough that people will listen to this. But, what I really wanted to say is, of course, tell you about the product, but also to tell you that, we've done a beta. So I have been programming longer than you guys, many of you were born. So I started with Fortran in 1980. And you probably haven't even heard of Pascal. And then I moved on to C, and that was a huge sigh of relief from things like Pascal. And I, even in the middle, had a computer support job where I wrote COBOL programs for about 6 months. Hurried away from that job, you'd be certain of that. But, my PhD in computer science only means that I've been coding for a really long time. And I stopped coding in 2002, That was a long time ago. But I started coding again last year because when I started this company, my co-founder and I, she's also a woman, Kathy, we worked together in the late 90s at a company, and we realized that we have to actually get down and start doing some coding if we want to get this product done. So she wrote the server code. It's all in Python, and I wrote the Android code in Java on the Android device where we have our beta. So I left off with C and C++ in 2002, and in 2012 I picked up Java and Android, and I wrote the Android code. And now I'm writing a JavaScript version because I'm porting this thing to a car platform. So one of the exciting things that's happened is, I wrote for and got an NSF grant for $150,000 because a great applicability for this application is the blind and the people with low vision. But another great applicability is all those times in the day when you have that block of time when your eyes are busy. Think about when you're driving or you're exercising in a treadmill in the gym. You cannot read. You cannot also read when, say, you're gardening or you're prepping food in the kitchen and you're cooking. So these are all the times when you can be listening to news that you would normally read rather than be forced to listen to what the radio brings to you. So that's what we're doing. And I have pitched this idea to a lot of people, and I have to tell you, women really take to this far more than men do. So we decided that we're going to market this to women first, because women want to be informed. The difficulty I'm having is actually trying to figure out what interests I should focus on first, because women have a really wide interest range as well. So this has been, a real problem for me in trying to figure out what content do I want to market first. And, I'll find something out. But we got accepted to the Volkswagen Accelerator program. That's in cooperation with Plug and Play down in Sunnyvale, because this is a great thing that can come to the head unit in a car. That's a natural place for it to belong there. And they like our audio quality, in fact. So we are working on the final apps for both iOS and Android. We hired an iOS programmer. And we will have the apps in the market in a couple of months. Please download it and be our first customers. But the shameless plug that I have today is we are looking for developers. If you're interested in a startup environment at the ground level, we have a little bit of money, not a lot. My co-founder and I want to go out and do sales and marketing and fundraising. So we want another developer to come on board to help us out. So do come and join us. And I also just started a meetup for women entrepreneurs. So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to sort of look at how to start a company and that process, because I've been struggling with this for 2 years now, and I have a lot of information I'd like to, pass on to people to help them. And I want to focus on women. So thank you.
Okay, for our final speaker tonight is going to be Fiona. Fiona is going to be talking about authentication for dummies. Fiona is a full-stack developer who loves making pretty user interfaces, and she's learned how to code at Pivotal Labs and is now kicking butt with Airbnb. So following her presentation, we are going to start the impromptu lightning talks. Amanda's going to go first, followed by someone from Pie Ladies who had an announcement as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like plugging it in is a good idea. Oh no, not. It's just me.
No, I should have asked.
Hi everybody. So today I'm here to talk about authentication. I actually decided to talk about this topic because I think it's something that's really important for every web application or even non-web applications. But I never really gave a thought about it until one day my HackBright student came up to me and she showed me her database and she was storing passwords in plain text. So I'm just gonna okay. But it was okay because no one really uses the app. Yet. All right. All right. So what is authentication? Well, authentication is just basically a way for users to be able to prove that they are who they say they are. I mean, 99% of the time users enter a password, but I'm sure you guys have all heard of the fancy new shit where they use your eyes or your thumbprints or whatever. So as an app developer, why do you need to care about this? Well, the long and the short is your database can be compromised. Maybe somebody walks up to your computer and like when you're in the bathroom, secretly like hacks your computer. But actually most of the time it's like people on the internet hacking your computer. So as an app developer, you want to assume that anyone can view the data in your databases, and you want to be able to store your data in a way that doesn't let your user data be compromised. With great power comes great responsibility. Yeah, that's a cliche, I know. So the truth is that users use the same password across multiple sites. You need to make sure that if your database is hacked, your other accounts won't be compromised. Let's say you're building a fashion app, a really small fashion app, and your user uses that password for your app for Bank of America, and then somebody hacks your app and sees their password, and then your Bank of America account gets compromised, and I can tell you that they probably won't be very happy with you. So I'm going to go over a few common ways that you can store passwords. This is the plain text way, which I've mentioned is really bad, because if somebody was able to access your database, they could figure out your user's password immediately. So don't do this. So what can we do? We cannot store the password directly. So maybe there's some way that we could encode the password in a way that will allow us to verify the password when they enter it again, but not directly show what the password is. So this is called hashing. So I'm just going to do the example with Pig Latin because it's easy to explain. But please don't use Pig Latin as a hashing algorithm for your passwords. So hashing is better because ideally when somebody looks at the hash password, they won't be able to tell what the actual password is. But once somebody has entered the password to log in, you can verify whether it's correct. And in this case, you would do it by, let's say I entered the password, I would translate it to S word A and verify it against the hash password, which I store in my database. So as a good hashing algorithm which is not Pig Latin, would be really easy to convert between the password and the hash version, but hard to convert from the hash password to the password. So not Pig Latin, as I said. So hashing isn't perfect because if two people have the same password, then it looks the same in the database. And, well, that's just not good because it's vulnerable to a lot of attacks. Like, for instance, maybe they would guess that if 50% of the users have your password, then maybe it's something really common. Like, actually, do you know Homer Simpson is a very common password? All right. So then instead of hashing the password directly, what you often want to do is to add a salt, which is just an additional string which you add to your password when you hash it. So an example would be maybe you could hash it by using the username as a salt for the hash. So in this example, what you do is that you take the username and the password, and then you translate it using Pig Latin, so that people with the same passwords still have different hashes. So for example, for me, if my name was Fiona and my password was password, then my hash password would be Fiona password day. But for user Sarah with the password, it would be era password say. It's wrong there. So this is the most secure option, i.e. you should be doing this. But another really important thing is making sure that you pick a good hash function. The last option is to not have a password for your app. So that makes it easy because you don't have to worry about their passwords getting leaked. So using like Facebook Connect or Twitter Connect. And what this looks like is that Facebook would then give you a special application token that you can store. And whenever you need to authenticate a user, you go and check with Facebook. Are they logged into Facebook and is this token valid? So this is pretty secure because if, let's say, your database is compromised, it doesn't affect their Facebook account or their other Facebook apps. So thanks for listening to me.